Let's move on. So our next speaker is another medical student, Christopher Root. Christopher is a second-year osteopathic medical student at Lincoln Memorial University in Knoxville, Tennessee. He said, in the rare event that I have free time, I enjoy writing music, another musician, and tinkering with electronics or 3D printers. Following medical school, he wants to pursue ophthalmology and maybe returning home with his wife to Florida to practice. Okay, Christopher, take it away.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Pleasure to meet you all 60 of you. So yes, thank you, Dr. Singh, for the introduction, and thanks to the college for hosting this program. Like you said, I'm a second-year medical student, so I do feel strange talking to a bunch of doctors and attendings and professionals who know a whole lot more than I do. But I'm going to let you guys know something. So I'm actually going to be doing this speech without any visual aid, without any slides, PowerPoints, any kind of like outside resources. I want to try to do this off the cuff, try to stream of consciousness talk. Me and Dr. Singh spoke, and we identified that I have a little bit of a problem with small talk. And I think because we're sort of professionals here, we're all medical professionals, or I'm trying to be one, I guess, but we're good at finding a goal, setting a goal, and then working our way towards that, like a linear fashion. I've got steps. But small talk, I really struggle with. I've got a hard time doing with it. So I'm completely outside of my comfort zone here. But I'm going to get through it. We're going to try, because I'm a low skill, high will person, right? So Chad, earlier, another colleague, actually, he's a student, a friend of mine at my school. He brought up a story where he struggled giving a speech at a nursing like an SGA thing for his nursing program, and it reminded me of a story when I was about 19 or 20 years old. I was in Barnes and Noble, and they had like a Starbucks in the corner. If you guys, know how that was, that little coffee shop. And I remember sitting there, and there was a girl. She was sitting at a table a little further away, and I noticed her, and I sat there, and I was afraid. I was kind of scared. I didn't know how to approach this person. I wanted to go speak with her. I wanted to go talk to her, get to know her. And so I finally built up enough courage, and I went over, and I don't know what I said. It might have been something stupid. And she's like reading, and she looks up, and she smirks and closes her book and walks off. Like that, I don't even think she said anything to me. So this could be my poor speaking, or I don't know, maybe, but that haunted me like for a very long time. And the worst part, here's the worst part. She probably doesn't even remember it, right? Like this has been killing me for like 15 years, but it didn't mean anything to her. So it's just a little bit of a story, but talking with Dr. Singh has been great. It's been good to help identify and hone in on some things that I could use help with. So my top 3 strengths, we found out, were creativity, appreciation of beauty, and the love of learning. Dr. Singh had me watch a movie called The Squid and the Whale, and it made me so uncomfortable I couldn't finish it. One of you, I think earlier, talked about watching a movie with a family member, and they were like, why are we watching this? It's a homework assignment. I had to tell my wife the same thing, because she's watching it with me, and she saw me getting kind of uncomfortable with this movie. It was challenging to get through. But I guess to try to work on those 3 strengths, Dr. Singh also asked me to start taking pictures each day. So take a photo and think about it. Look at that photo. Look at it from a different perspective. Think about describing it in different ways. And I'd never really done that, and it almost brought on that sort of meditative state. When I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm looking at this picture. The first picture I took, I sent to him, and it was just a small picture of my soldering iron, like where I clean my soldering iron. And it looks crazy. It's okay. There's like solder spitting all over the place. It's messy. It looks dirty, but looking at it was interesting because it kind of made me think, well, you have to make a mess um, to make something beautiful. Like oftentimes, like with paint, with art, you have to try different things. And so it was interesting to look from different perspectives. And I think that's what Dr. Singh has helped me, and hopefully all of you to do, is to look at different perspectives. We're told things like you have to, in order to change starts from within. And so you need to be able to take a look at yourself. And that's difficult, especially when when I'm a medical student. I'm a second year. It's horrible. I won't pretend it's not. Being a student med school is hard. So being able to take care of yourself, looking after yourself, where are you in the world, has been a challenge. But yeah, going back to, I guess, some of the strategies and tools that Dr. Singh has given us, I'll talk about that skill will matrix. So yeah, I live up in that top left corner, right? So I've got a lot of will, and I don't have a lot of skill. I know Dr. Singh is kind of like Neo in the Matrix. He can like probably stop bullets and like walk on walls and stuff like that. He's a real professional. But I'm glad, and I think was it Dr. Graining described how she appreciates students that have that will, although they don't have the skill yet. So recognizing that, hey, I'm actually in a place that someone I can learn from actually appreciates. That's a good place to be. It's better than not having any will. Um, but we looked at the video, the Death by PowerPoint, and that's why I chose sort of not to use any slides or visual aid. I struggle with talking off the cuff and shooting the breeze or chit chat, small talk. And so I thought, if I have this high will, this little skill, and I also, I think I have a hard time with, well, first off, yes, I have a hard time with small talk, but I have high will. And if I look at my weaknesses on the character development chart, my my bottom three weaknesses are related to courage. Two of the three bottom ones are related to courage. And I thought that's interesting because I am a musician. Before I started medical school, I performed on stage all the time. And I had no problem with that, but I was with a team. I was with a group of people, and we kind of knew our set list, right? We know how we're playing. I know when the drummer is doing this, we're setting up for this song. My singer speaking to the crowd, he says this. I know that's kind of a cue for we're going to be doing this now. And so there was still a formula there. It wasn't passive chit chat. It's a little bit different, but I think that just being able for me, with all the chaos that school is, to look back at and be able to ground myself. So whether it's looking at some picture that I've taken and thinking of it from different perspectives, or doing some of the meditation practices, focusing on your breathing. Spirituality, for example, wasn't in my strengths, at least in my top three or bottom three, but I think that having a foundation or like a rock is similar to spirituality. I've heard of religion being described as a rock. And so I've done some of Dr. Singh's meditation practices. It says, focus on your breathing. It's always there. It's with you. It's sort of almost spiritual in nature, I think. And so that's been powerful to me. I'm also very glad that while I haven't had to like manage a team or coordinate a team, I have these tools because I mean, I've just started now with the whole professional email thing, and it's been kind of terrible. My school's very bad at it. I have CCs from people I've never met or talked to, and I'm not interested in talking with, and things like that. I think that death by PowerPoint should be followed probably with like a death by CC, like because that's just it's a big mess. But I'm curious to see where this, if I want, I'm grateful that I was able to come to your presentation earlier in the year. When I don't know if many of you were there in South Carolina, there was a Myrtle Beach conference, and I heard Dr. Singh talk. I was only a first year med student then. And so I thought I was a little out of my realm, a little off base being there with all of these professionals, but I think getting the jump on some of these problems, especially with communication, coordinating with the team and everything, is definitely a leg up. I think that's probably going to be useful. Chad, my classmate, described being on one of the teams for our school where we take kind of a collective opinion from our classmates about courses, and so sort of a course development team for us to present to the professors at the end of our semesters. And I'm starting that. In fact, we have our first meeting on Monday because we had a big exam on Friday. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to helping hopefully make it more smooth, make it run smoother. So that 3-2-1 thing with the emails I've been trying to work on, but I'm not in really a position to tell administration to stop CCing me. I don't think that's probably the right move at this point. But I am looking forward to utilizing it in the future. But yeah, I have a hard time with small talk, with chit chat, with thinking just off the brain. And so I'm definitely putting myself in an uncomfortable position, but everyone here has been, I think, very welcoming. And so I'm happy to exercise, if that's what we'll call it, with you all. And I appreciate you guys for having me.
Thank you. Very well done.
Thank you. Thanks, Chad.
Before others have a question for you, let me ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, and I shared with you, and this is an unusual group of presenters. We have two people with appreciation of beauty and excellence. And you are one of them. So when that came up, how did that feel to you? That actually is a character strength and that you have it. How did that feel?
Well, it was confusing that it was a character strength. I don't see how that could be a character strength, but I I'm glad it resonates. That sounds correct. In our one-on-one, I'll share that I oftentimes will be out if I'm with people, or even with my wife, for example, we'll be somewhere and everyone will pull their phone out. If you're at who knows, if there's a pretty sunset or something, and everyone will take their phone out. And my interpretation is, why don't we all just try to absorb it ourselves? That's not, picture's never going to look that good, you know? You're distracting from the experience itself. Like, we're supposed to relish this, like, it's enjoy it for what it is. It's fleeting, and that's part of what makes it beautiful, right? So I was shocked that it was on my list, or that it was even on the list, but I'm not surprised that it was in my strengths. How to maybe enterprise on that strength, I'll hopefully figure out as I explore some of your techniques, strategies, and stuff. But I'm glad that it was on there. I just don't really know how to use it yet. So
What I asked you to do, the formal foundation is in what's called contemplative walking. But we live in modern worlds, and contemplative walking is old, before the cameras. But when you go out on a walk, that's a moment that's only going to exist on Earth once. You said fleeting, but can you see depth in it? Can you see more in it? And can you savor from it? That's called reminiscing, by the way. So you can do something, capture it, bring it home, and reminisce. People reminisce about their weddings. They look at wedding pictures, children are born, they see their pictures and reminisce about that. Vacations, people reminisce about. So that is actually a very good, and it creates a lot of well-being as well. So I coined the term cell phone spirituality. You can make even when you go check your mail, you go out, you can find something that can give you depth of an experience. So that's where appreciation of beauty and excellence, my guess, because it came to you, you were able to enjoy the moment, and other people have to bring it home so they can reminisce on it later. So, but you can try doing it and enhance this even more. You see what I'm saying? So, but we have people asking you questions.
Sure.
Well,
Let's see.
Dr. Castillo says very good, very open and refreshing. But Dr. Winter says, I've never seen the movie, Chris. Why did you not like the squid and the whale? It's squid
It
and the whale, yeah.
the squid and the whale. The squid in the whale, that might be even more scary.
Even more.
Uh the Squid and the Whale was a movie, has Jeff Bridges and Jesse Eisenberg in it, from around I think 2005 or 6. And it describes a family in the 80s, I believe, and it's uh two parents who have two children. One's a teenager and one's maybe around 10 years old, and the parents go through a difficult breakup. And the children basically take sides. That's past, let's say, the formative years of the teenager, and he sides with the father who was at one point a very successful person. However, the father had almost a hostile relationship with the mother, where he thought less of her. Um, she was never good enough, and he was the breadwinner, and he was right about everything. And if anything ever went wrong, it was the mother's fault, and she needed to know that, and so he would let her know. The older son took that, sort of embodied that spirit from his father, and sided with the father, while the younger brother seemed to more relate with the mother, and not really understand, why is dad so critical? Why is he so harsh? And I think I had a problem with it because of my upbringing. My parents split up when I was about 10 years old, the same formative years, and it was very challenging. Um, and my parents came from very different. My dad is a professional, and my mother was married at 17, and had kids at 17. So she never really developed into a professional. She was very dependent on my dad. And
Mhm.
so when they split up and we had this kind of weird custody battle thing, and we wound up with getting, I'm sorry if I'm getting a bit personal, but it was a split custody. So I had 2 weeks with my father and 2 weeks with my mother. And I think the movie really brought up some emotional distress that I experienced,
Mhm.
and it made it very challenging. In fact, my wife was watching it with me, and she could tell I was getting disturbed. Like, this was
Mhm.
disturbing. Although it wasn't, tit for tat, exactly what happened with me. It was maybe certain things just rang in me a little bit, struck a chord. I think someone said before, and this movie struck a chord. Unfortunately, it was a dissonant chord, and it was kind of off-putting.
No
So
way.
perhaps there's some trauma I still
Well,
need
I
to
think,
work through, but recognizing it is important. And I think if it's illustrated in a movie, it can maybe help me digest it. So
but on the one level, the movies which have, these kind of things, which are not like, now I'm not making fun of movies which have bravery, but I'm talking about this sort of softer things like forgiveness, things like self-reflection's gonna come in. They are not like even companionate love that we talked about in Tender Mercies. They are not sort of like the movies which are celebrated in culture. Our heroes in the culture, they take out swords and guns and they're drinking and they're breaking doors and knocking down teeth and all that stuff. Rather than, I have to sit through this movie and watch it. Imagine how much that is. See? Now,
right.
Dr. Trainer gave you a high compliment. He said your response to the movie foreshadows great success as a clinician.
Well, thank you very much.
Dr.
Appreciate that.
Graining is seconding it. And I am
Terrific.
thirding it. There is research. And the research comes
It's
from vast body of psychiatry, where when we try one technique, another technique of therapy, third technique of, do you know what was the one thing that always spelled more success as a clinician as compared to technique? It was presence of empathy. A doctor has to have empathy, whose word root is pathos, the feelings, and to be able to connect with the patient at that level. So no matter how technically sound you are, And that's where, so data says that, and now two expert teachers have said to you that your reaction is a good mark of a good clinician. Don't let it die. Dr. Castillo is saying compassion is the key. That's what he lives by. When I introduced him, that's what I said. That's what he lives by. So, and Dr. Weigel is saying it's always tough when it's a personal reflection, but you can grow from it. That's what you do.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm glad I was able to identify it. And thank you again for helping me to kind of narrow that down. Um, and I know I was only able to log on last night towards the end, but I caught Dr. Rizwan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm really curious where I'm going to be let's say next year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna keep up with these as they become more relevant. I haven't been able to
Mm-hmm.
see the utility in most of them yet
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not within a
Well,
team that
those
I can
tools, yes, those tools.
exercise.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you all again. Appreciate
But
it.
you spoke very well, so thank you. Anybody else? Anything else anybody has for Christopher before we let him go? So thank you. So you see, when you tell a good story, it resonates with others, and someone on the other end can tell you, don't let this die. Keep it alive. Okay,
Will do.
wonderful. Well, our next speaker comes from California, Dr. Timothy Winter. He completed his Bachelor of Arts in Spanish at Brigham Young University. Then he attended medical school at Western University of Health Sciences and ophthalmology residency training at Oklahoma State University. His training continued with fellowships in neuro-ophthalmology at University of Miami and pediatric ophthalmology at University of Iowa. Very, very deep specialization. He began practice in 2013, and his interests include complex strabismus and optic disc disruption. His research is sponsored by a restricted grant from Linda and Johnny Stevens Neuro-Ophthalmology Special Projects Fund at Loma Linda University Eye Institute. So here's Dr. Winter.
Well, good morning. Thanks, Harjot, for the introduction. I'm outside here at our Airbnb. We had a death in the family the last couple of weeks. So we're just celebrating here with the life of my father-in-law. And just want to say thank you for this opportunity to do that, this talk, and just kind of explain our situation at this point. So my choice in discussing my experience with Dr. Singh was to talk about speaking. And I did so because I've had some trouble in my employ. I'm currently an assistant professor at Loma Linda Eye Institute. And, I speak with lots of patients, sometimes having to give feedback to residents. Of course, there's the annual review with your chair, and then the meeting and discussion with people from human resources. So I've had plenty of opportunity to kind of speak and analyze my speech and how I speak with others. And so I wanted to share with you some of the experiences that I've had as over the last couple of weeks, even. So I want to start out with a pretty interesting story. I had this young patient. I'm a pediatric neuro-ophthalmologist, and I had a young 8-year-old girl who came to us by way of the emergency department after having been found to have a dilated pupil by her mother. The mother raced off to the emergency department, had neuroimaging, which was found to be normal, and is scheduled to follow up with me as an outpatient. And the first thing that the mom wanted to know, obviously, was what caused this? The MRI is normal. What's going on? So, as any good clinician starts, I asked a very thorough history. And in the middle of the conversation, I asked, well, did you start any new medications? And no, I didn't. I said, well, any drops? And she said, well, my daughter got out of the pool that weekend. And so, of course, I just put some eye drops in her eyes to get rid of the redness. And, I used the Visine. And so that's all. And I said, I think it was the Visine. And the mother leaned into me and said, it was not the Visine. So pardon me if I just scared you or woken you up from a brief nap, but I too was scared, and I thought, oh my word, what have I done? And so I wanted to share that with you as an example of maybe how I could do better in my speech. Before having this encounter, I never anticipated a few things. Well, first off, that I would upset a mother so terribly by helping her understand why her child's eye was dilated. But maybe let me give you an example of some of the things that I did wrong. So as we've learned today from many of the discussants and from Dr. Singh, we really need to start out with the three aspects of what we're having this talk about. The context is very important. The concept is important, and the content is important. I may make a bold statement here, but I think that I would like to start out by understanding the concept. So in other words, in this particular case, I think I should have had the idea, the concept of, number one, let's avoid panic at all costs. And number two, we need to create interdependence. As we've learned earlier today, interdependence is very important, not only in our work-life balance with our families, but also with our work families and also with our patients. And so I could have avoided panic simply by following, some criteria. And I think, again, if we understand our patients or understand the situation that they're coming from, have the empathy that we talked about earlier, and then understanding ourselves, I think we could probably help them a little better. So if I would have started out with a skill-will assessment, I would have understood that mom has absolutely no skill in this area. And she has an incredible will. She wants her daughter to be well. Then I would have proceeded to the context. My ethos is I'm a pupillary expert. I see children with problem every single day. Then I could have expressed some pathos by saying, when I was in training, I saw a patient who had a very large dilated pupil, and she was a healthcare worker who was on her honeymoon when she came into our emergency department with a single dilated pupil. And as I walked in the room as a first-year resident, I noticed behind her ear was a large scopolamine patch, probably from her trip on a cruise. And as I walked in the room behind me, or in front of me, was a lot of doctors with much more experience than I. And none of them had thought about that. And so when we finally did our rounds for the day, I asked, did anyone else see that scopolamine patch on the eye or on the ear? And nobody said anything. So it reminded me that if I can see something and I can say something, maybe we can avoid $1 million workup, like an angiogram, for an 18-year-old woman on her honeymoon who just wore a scopolamine patch. That would have maybe helped her understand, that my interest and experience with this pupillary problem. And then I could have began with the logos. The MRI was normal. This eye exam looks pretty normal. And so I think that the fact that you think it's getting better is all good news. But instead, what I did, as soon as I heard that history component, I jumped right in to explain, oh, thank heavens we kind of realized this. But that probably set mom into panic mode. After I shared my ethos, pathos, and logos, I could have started with some content about how eye drops can sometimes cause dilation, and maybe that was the cause. So I share with you that experience to kind of help you illustrate some of the things that I've learned recently. Another experience I had just yesterday. We work with residents, some of us, and if we don't work with residents, we also work with patients. And there's that power dynamic where you are in charge and they're asking you for help. And same with the patient here, as with the mom, I wanted to try to avoid panic. And I think it's very important when the power dynamic is that you are the one with the power and the others are those without the power. So another example of how to avoid panic is with that I had yesterday was with one of the residents I was working with. She is a first-year ophthalmology resident, and I've had one other day in clinic with her, and she seemed very interested. In other words, her skill-will diagnostic was such that she had low skill, but incredible will, similar to my patient. And so having known that, that she had this interest and this will to learn, I asked her at the beginning of my adult strabismus clinic to really focus on a history and a physical exam, and then coming talking to me about what she thinks is going on. And unfortunately, she really struggled with that. She spent maybe 5 minutes on the history and like less than that on the exam, and then left the room and went out to the next patient. So when she came and talked to me and said, "Okay, doctor, I think you need to check the eye alignment," I said, "Okay, so what about this in the history?" "Oh, I didn't ask that." "Well, what about that in the exam?" "Oh, I didn't ask that." So at that point, I realized that she did have incredible skill or incredible will, but very little skill. And I just took the time again to say, okay, I know then if she has incredible will and low skill, she is in a phase that we call training phase. No skill, but will. She has an interest in being trained. She's applied with our program. And as a trainer, I recognized that she was someone that I could then give a second chance to. And I said, okay, well, would you mind taking a little bit more time with this patient and asking a few more questions? Would you mind looking at the patient's pictures before? Would you mind spending a little bit more time on the exam? In this particular case, strabismus could be checked in 9 different gazes, also at near and at distance, and also in the tilting of the head to the right and to the left. And then after you do that, well, did you gonna come back and find me? And I could see on her face, she was nervous. She was almost a little bit upset by maybe I was calling her out on the carpet, that I was saying that she was not doing a very good job. And so as she went back in to evaluate the patient, and I gave her as much time, I said, take an hour if you need it. And I went back in the room. She had a smile on her face. And I was so excited to say that I read the room, gave her another chance at this. But I want to talk you out of having that experience and into maybe another one. What if she would have had, what if I didn't have this experience and I didn't know that she had a will? I think if she had no skill and no will, it's important to start with ethos all over again. This person has no idea why they need to be learning these things. This resident would have no clue why she is being asked to check 9 cardinal gazes, right and left head tilts, near and distance, until she knows who I am and that I care about her. The refrain, "I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care," rings true here. And then if she would have incredible skill and incredible will, maybe that's the level of a fellow, where we can just delegate that and the fellow knows exactly what to do. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've learned in the process. Number one, patients, and I include me and us in this, have personality disorders. Between 10 and 15% of all of our patients are going to have some personality disorder. And that includes up to 30 or even 50% of all of our visits. So when we go back to our clinics after this weekend, maybe we could have a little bit of empathy, as was mentioned earlier, that they're struggling with death or other problems in their life. And we can learn how to have difficult conversations. And as we implement these things that we're learning, we don't have to run away from those difficult conversations, but we can actually learn to enjoy them. Number two, we belong to a guild. Even though these guilds have different phases, we are all physicians. We may be trainees. We may be providers. We may be forest dwellers, or we may even be masters. We need to embrace the stages of our life, wherever it may be. Like Dr. Root was sharing, he's at the very early stage of his training versus Dr. Carrillo, who's in the master stage. I feel like I'm in that forest dweller stage where my kids are out of the house. Patients are abundant. Surgery is just waiting. And I'm there chugging and plugging every single day to try and make my life easier on my family, but also my patients. Number three, interdependence is the highest level of human existence. If we align our interests with those we work with, what power can come from that? If we can identify our bosses, not just our immediate boss, but those who actually solve our problems, our patient phone calls, our late patients, who's going to solve those problems? Once we identify who those people are, we need to find out what's their communication style. What are their goals and their priorities? And how can we build trust with those people? So in summary, if I could make a few suggestions and things that I've really appreciated in this experience, number one would be to take the VIA survey, to know yourself. If you don't know yourself, you really are going to have a hard time implementing any of these things. Share with you some of my strengths, and mine are honesty, number one. Number two, kindness. Number three, bravery. Number four, creativity. And number five, humor. And that really helps me understand what it is that I can do to communicate with my patients better, to communicate with my residents better. But also, without understanding that, I really don't know what my weaknesses are either. So number two, know your audience. What is their skill will diagnostic? If you know that they are low skill and low will, really they have to trust you before you're going to get anything out of this. And number three, we need to embrace the interdependence. I've always kind of seen that as a challenge, right? Oh boy, there's so many people I have to coordinate with. But guess what? That's not going to go away. And the more higher up the ladder, so to speak, that you get, it's going to be even more important to have that interdependence and to know your bosses and their communication styles and their priorities and skills and wills. So in conclusion, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Singh. It's been an incredible journey for me. Hopefully we were able to express some of that with you. And number two, I'd like to say thanks to Ralph and McKinsey for putting this together. What an incredible opportunity we have as providers to learn how to do this and to learn how to become better on a daily basis. Thank you.
No, thank you. And you gave these beautiful statements, like we call categorical statements. And I would call their gems, pearls of wisdom that summarize it so well. And how you said empathy is at the center of everything. You took stuff to a more advanced level. Yes, so Christopher is saying great talk, Sean is saying nice job. Of course, it was very thoughtful in the sense that a person with some kind of experience can say things like that. Even that you said, oh, well, we have patients with personality disorders, right? So, and they actually cause a lot of repeat visits. They're the ones who complain the most. And we have to know, even when, by the way, being empathic doesn't mean we always have to be soft. Even when you fire a patient, you can do that out of empathy too. But it has to come from that place that at this point, this is what this patient needs to get better, rather than saying, oh, this one keeps on irritating me. Let me ask you, this is a hard question, what moved you during the talk when you were speaking?
Yeah, I just think I was coming home and my father-in-law passed away. And even just driving home from the funeral, you're realizing, oh, this person's driving slow, this person's cutting and weaving in and out of traffic, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what challenges they're going through. And that's I'm not always so self-aware, but I just wanted to express that, we don't know the challenges. Even just going to work on Thursday, right after the funeral was Wednesday, even just going to work on Thursday, the mundane task of saying hi to the nurses, one of them was like just walking by, said, hey, how's it going? And she started telling me the exact same situation. Her mother-in-law had just passed away, and now her father is having mental disorder, and her husband is having to deal with the family dynamic of a brother-in-law, or a brother who wants to take the family inheritance, who has been gone for the last 10 years and now wants to be part of the family again. And I just thought, wow, like I had never anticipated this stage of life to be such a difficult for everyone. Like, as you become more self-aware, I feel like it becomes easier to empathize, to become understanding of what everyone else's experiences are. And it just kind of hit me at that moment.
Mm. In fact, you bring one other thing to the table, which is there's a difference in almost like processing speed of a doctor versus the person you may be talking to. And for example, you gave story of this mother, and you got it. But now you have to get the other person to understand it. So doctor's job isn't just to say, aha, that's it, versus, oh, now I have to get the other person to see it and understand it. So in
Right.
fact, it's almost like a Ferrari who's running here versus, another car which is really trying to just keep up. It's not the other car to say, I'm gonna now speed up and then burn out. Ferrari to slow down and say, well, this is how you do it. That kind of a thing. That's why I like movies which have characters who are highly intelligent. And we mentioned two movies today. Dr. Trainer was talking about Moonrise Kingdom. It's a Wes Anderson movie. He always makes movies where characters are very intelligent and their struggles are emotional. Highly intelligent people struggling emotionally. And so is the squid and the whale. These are very intelligent people. You can see yourself, even you talk like we talk like that sometimes, how the characters talk in the movie. And that's why these movies are less known, because maybe some people can't relate. Big populations cannot relate to these experiences, but it's very, very good to see that. So thank you for kicking this whole thing up to a different level. So very advanced things. Thank you very much, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, that brings us to our last speaker before we wrap up. So the last doctor champion is Dr. Rose Cunningham Ahumada. She's a board-certified comprehensive ophthalmologist in private practice at Eye Associates of Orange County in Santa Ana and Mission Viejo, which is California, since 2005. She studied medicine at Western University of Health Sciences College of Osteopathic Medicine of the Pacific in Pomona, California, and earned her DO degree in 2001. She completed her ophthalmology residency training in 2005 in Detroit, Michigan, at Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine. She was the chief resident in her final year and was awarded the Patrick Murray Award. Dr. Cunningham Ahumada is from Santa Ana, California, which is the same area. In her free time, she volunteers for Boy Scouts of America as a merit badge counselor and troop committee member. You earlier heard she goes to town hall meetings for the legislators. She enjoys the outdoors and is a certified wilderness first responder. She also enjoys karaoke, fruit and vegetable gardening at her home. In fact, when we did luxuriating meditation, she brought the citrus from her house. And she loves to read for pleasure. She's the one who gave us a little sense of direction of taking side quests and adventures. And here's Dr. Cunningham Ahumada. Welcome.
Hello. All right. So this is my journey. That's why I have the map to Middle Earth behind me, because I feel like an explorer sort of in uncharted territories. And this is my my mentor here to guide and help me along. The reason that I decided to sign up for being a facilitator and going last, let me just say, it's kind of hard because there's so many good acts. It's a tough act to follow, they say, times 10 or more. In any case, my office, there's the boomer, who's my senior partner, me, who's the Gen X. We've been together since 2005. And then in 2012, we added a millennial. So that is our dynamic and it works. We've been so happy working together, seeing patients. And our motto that we had was excellence in eye care. So we had a vision, a unified view of how we were running this practice. Our patients are happy, our staff is happy and loyal, and we're prosperous. So then we made a deal with the devil. So that would be the private equity, in case you did not know. So in 2020, at the end of an extremely interesting year, so it was a pandemic year, we went through being shut down for a bit and then opening a little bit and doing all that stuff. So after that sort of tumultuous year, we decided, hey, let's go ahead, we will partner with private equity. So we became employees under this umbrella, this larger corporation, and we set up an MSO, which is supposed to relieve us of the burdens of running the practice so that we can focus on what mattered, which is seeing patients and doing tons and tons of surgery, so much surgery you wouldn't even know what to do with yourself. We would keep on doing what we loved and enjoyed, but management tasks, and that would be taken off of our plates. We were also promised rainbows and unicorns and a choir of angels to round out just like how awesome this whole experience was going to be. So that's sort of what we're going into. Enter the corporate overlords. So one of the things that I remember was when our transition consultant from the big corporation came to our office, and I told her, yeah, this is kind of a bittersweet day because we're getting onboarded, and I feel bad because my staff is going to be sad. And she said, well, why would they be sad? Well, because they're going to lose their jobs. I mean, maybe not like right away, but eventually they're going to lose their jobs because that's how corporate takeovers and that sort of thing happen, as far as I know. And no, I don't have an MBA, so I don't like have firsthand knowledge of that, but that's just like what I assume. And then she just laughed and she's like, of course that's not going to happen. So Zoom to today, we have only 3 of our original staff in one of our offices, and our other office, because we have 2 locations, our other office, they're all not staff that were with us. So they brought along with their corporate culture meetings. So our office manager, who was running both offices, she left not too long afterwards, after realizing that she had to spend time in 1-hour meetings so that she could contribute her like 5-minute blurb of information. And then the rest of that time is just sitting there listening to all of the other office managers giving their blurbs of information. So it wasn't very helpful. So she left, and her replacements, 2 replacements. It takes 2 people to do what she could alone do. And the subsequent hires, all of those people are loyal not to the doctors, but to the corporation. That's where their loyalty lies. So the corporate culture is put in place by our vice presidents, all these people with titles that are just sort of like looking for their next promotion or their next gig. So we have, buzzwords like KPIs and scorecards, and we're subjected to an abundance of meetings and compulsory presentations to optometrists, which we present as continuing education programs. And then on top of that, just trying to get along with these employees who are hired without our input and still trying to do what's best for our patients. So once our old business cards ran out with the excellence in eye care, we just have these plain, I think they're plain and boring business cards, but they are uniform across the entire corporation. So like I felt like that just sort of left us without a vision or a mission statement, and that's just kind of where we're at. So this is what happened this year, and that's where I ended up. I sent an email to our corporate compliance officer about concerns I had about co-signing optometry charts or optometry notes, and it was ignored. This was in May. It was ignored, never heard back. I've since spoken with this person like for other things, but this just like never went anywhere. And then the second thing happened in June. So in June, we had a tech that called out of work. So we asked for a regional tech. So we have regional techs that cover the general geographic area. and they'll come in and float between offices as needed. So she'd worked in our office once before. So it's Friday, it's 4:25. I checked the schedule to see how we're doing, and I noticed that I was called for a patient who was roomed for me to go see. So I opened the encounter on my iPad and the EMR, and I looked, and there was like a little bit of HPI and no workup. There's no vision, there's no eye pressure. So I was like, oh, this is weird. What happened? So I share an office. The doctors were all in one office. Yeah, Dr. Optometrist, I will call her that to protect the innocent. Dr. Optometrist was right there, and she also helps in training our techs. So I showed her, I said, hey, look, I just have this patient. I've been called, they're roomed for me to go see them, but there's no vision, there's no workup, like there's no eye pressure, like what's going on? So I'm gonna go see what happened. And she came along with me too, because she's like, oh, I'm gonna see what happened too. So I went to the technician area, and the tech was there. Our own office techs were also there, like nobody was doing anything because there wasn't anything to be done. And I approached her, and I showed her the visit, and I asked her if she needed me to go see the patient and before dilating, because sometimes that happens, but they'll usually come and approach me. I don't have to like go find out. But then I told her that even if that was the case, that she still needed to like at least check the vision, check the pressure, like do more of a workup, even if she needed me to go and like, okay, that. And then she said she didn't know what happened. So I left, and I left Dr. Optometrist there still sort of talking to the techs in that area. I went and saw the patient. I did not give it a second thought again until a couple weeks later. And then we were short another tech once again. So I asked the office manager, hey, can we get a regional tech today? And she said, no. So why can't we have a regional tech? The tech refuses to come to the office because you yelled at her. I said, oh, okay, I yelled at her. Great. So she's never coming back to our office again. And so not only did I yell at her, Dr. Optometrist also yelled at her. And not only that, we yelled at her in front of patients. And on top of that, she was so hurt and devastated by this that she fled to the surgery scheduler's office, went in there so that she could cry and be comforted by our surgery scheduler. And our surgery scheduler is one of our original employees, so I know her very well, and she's very loyal. She's one of the people that was loyal to the doctors. And I asked her to confirm it, and she said, yeah, she was in here, she was crying, she was so upset. She said she's going to call a hotline. Like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, is it like a suicide prevention hotline or an HR whistleblower hotline? I have no idea. So I was just like, okay, this is really weird. And then I asked Dr. Optometrist, who's very mild-mannered. She's like exceptionally kind. She's like a really nice person. And I asked her like, hey, did you yell at this tech? Because apparently you and I both yelled at the tech in front of patients and made her cry and drove her to, I have no idea what. And she denied doing that. So I was thinking, okay, we're monsters apparently. So I made someone cry, and then on top of that, there's more. So again, I've got these two offices, Office A and Office B. In Office A, where we still have like our three original members of staff along with new staff. I chit chat with the staff. I approach them. They approach me regarding like any patient care questions. Like it works really well. Office B, which is like all under the guise of the office manager there. I traumatize them by giving them feedback and by asking them questions so that at this point, anything I want to relay to them, I relay to the office manager who then tells them. So I don't talk to them directly. Like it's pretty sad. So that just all got me thinking. So with this like whole like devastated crying regional tech, it just got me thinking, am I the problem? is my communication that bad? I mean, you guys tell me, maybe it is. Am I that ineffective? Am I doing the same? Like, what's even worse? Like, am I doing this to my patients? And like, I'm not even aware that I'm like devastating them. So when I got this email on July 5th about this mid-year program, I thought, maybe this is something that can help me, because it touches on communication and speaking and delegation and meetings on top of that too. Great. I'm here for that, because I love meetings so much. I just love going to them. So my goals in joining this program was to learn better ways to communicate at work and to deal with the meetings that I'm required to go to, including speaking at meetings, like when we have these CE programs. I was less concerned about the emails, and I was like, hey, delegation skills, that's a bonus. So I did the prep activities, and this I'll kind of run through real quick. So for this exercise, let me make this smaller. Okay, so for this exercise, I watched a video and I learned about ethos, pathos, and logos, and I learned that persuasion is hard. It also led to a side quest, which I'll circle back to, and which Dr. Singh alluded to. And then from Death by PowerPoint and Life After Death by PowerPoint, I learned the principles of design, including how to make this PowerPoint. From How to Start a Speech, I learned that you should avoid reading your CV as an opener, and you should avoid having technical difficulties like I just did as your opening of your speech. So that's all me. I also learned that some people apparently have the social skills to go into a bar and go up to a group of people and simply strike up a conversation. So that's me in a bar. So I'm just like trying to pretend like, hey, I'm in a bar, let's go talk. These are actual slides from the last presentation that I made. And so I put these slides, I was like, hey, this is going to make me more relatable. So people will be like, oh, I know about Santa Ana, or hey, MSU, rad. And then these are like some personal pictures, like, hey, these are the things I like. But apparently you don't walk up to a group in a bar and say, hey, I love 80s alternative music and making jam from fruit I've grown. So anyhow, those are no longer going to be, those are going to go out of rotation. From the speeches, I actually really enjoyed all of the 3 speeches. I learned that you should tell a story that's moving and use the appeal to emotion, whether it's a touching, sad story or humor, to deliver what I thought the common theme, which was use your positions for good, to affect good in the world. So yeah, I agree with that. And then for change, I learned about the stages of change and leading change, sense of urgency. And what I liked was that this is a model that's cyclical and that we can relapse, but we learn from each relapse. Once we're in that like termination where we like have that behavior as part of our life, if we fail, then we just learn from it, be kind to ourselves, and move on. I also learned that hiring consultants and forming task forces, which we do so that we can have more meetings or more people in our meetings, they don't really work. And I also learned, sadly, that most of these change efforts don't meet aspirations and lack vision. And then I started thinking, like, do I really want to affect a change? I don't know. I did the character strengths video, and this one I actually watched it twice. I got more out of it the second time because the first time I got the general gist of it, but the second time around I really felt like I understood more that I have all of these different intensities of light within myself, and that they burn or glow at different intensities depending on the situation or who I'm interacting with. And I learned that who you are is what you repeatedly do. And when I had to ponder the idea of what it would be like to have my strongest strengths removed from me, I kept a journal, but I wrote that I felt like I would die because it would just be like so foreign, like just a piece of me just gone. So anyway, I also learned that we need to cue ourselves to use our strengths. So that is, again, like having them burn at different intensities as needed. Prior to this, trying to sort of like understand myself, so like, and like how to interact with the world, I had done this personality test long ago. It's a pseudoscientific personality test. It basically, I came out as an INTJ repeatedly, multiple times over the years. Basically made me feel like I'm some kind of sociopath. So it felt good to have like an actual valid character strength assessment that so that I could just use that as entertainment purposes, like my horoscope, which I'm a Leo, by the way. So what were my character strengths? So my character strength number one was love of learning, and followed by prudence, honesty, perseverance, and judgment. So I really wasn't very surprised by the first one, and actually some of these other ones. And unfortunately, you can use your strengths for good, but also sometimes for evil. And I feel like sometimes I need to temper the brutal honesty versus just like honesty. My weaker strengths also did not surprise me. Kindness, fairness, social intelligence, who would have imagined, zest, and then the weakest strength, forgiveness. But anyway, so from thinking about and pondering love of learning, I ended up reading a book that I'm not yet done with on the art of persuasion, which is hard for me. I also gained insight about the types of meetings I enjoy, and the meetings that I dread. So the meetings I enjoy are like conferences, trainings, CME. We have these monthly surgeon meetings from all of the surgeons in our overall corporation, and they discuss interesting cases. It's kind of like, since I'm not in academics, it's kind of like a grand rounds equivalent. So for me, I love that. I'll sign in, no problem. I also gained insight about the emails that I read immediately, like when there's the big physician thread with questions or sharing insights. Those I'll click on immediately, and then those I'll just the other ones I'll leave on the back burner. So they just kind of help me understand what I gravitate towards. And then from honesty, I gained insight as to why I'm so bothered by meetings and corporate leaders. I have a very direct manner generally, and I don't respect people that talk out of both sides of their mouth. I found out later that from an email that our original vice president of one of our practice and some other practices did confirm. It was an email to other corporate folks about succeeding in the phase of clearing out the old staff and replacing them with their own staff. So like I knew the whole time that's what was going to happen, and yet our transition facilitator just lied right to my face. So anyhow, that's what I got from the honesty. And then my weaker strengths, they again don't surprise me. I know I can hold, these are not great, but I know I can hold a grudge like nobody's business. I believe life's not fair. I know I'm socially awkward, but I know I have these qualities. And I do let them shine for some because I've been married for like 22 years. I've raised two very good, competent children, and Eagle Scout and an almost Eagle Scout, and I have the same best friends since high school, freshman year. So yeah, I'm not like a complete monster, thankfully. Phew, okay. So for the movies, I decided to watch two movies. I decided to watch a movie for my strength and a movie to kind of help me deal with my weaker strength. So for the character strength, I watched Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin is autistic, and she is an animal behaviorist. She's a professor at Colorado State University, and she is responsible, well, I would say half of the cattle in our country are in systems that she designed. So anyway, I watched this movie. I really enjoyed this movie. I love her. Like, I would be friends with her because like I just completely relate to almost like all the things that she does. She watches to learn. So like at her aunt's farm, in one scene, she sees how this gate's not working, so she fixes the gate. She needed plans drafted for her proposed cattle management system. So she watches the drafting guy do the drafting blueprints. So she learns how to do the blueprints, and then she does the blueprints. She had an experience where she needed to get onto the feedlot, but no women are allowed on the feedlot. So she observed, she watches, and she learned that men drive trucks. Men wear certain clothes like overalls and these Western shirts. And so she disguised herself. She sold her VW Bug and got a janky old truck. And then they let her in. And she gained access so that she could pursue her educational goals. And then she watches the cows. She thinks about the perspective of the cows and uses that to like how she designs her facilities. She just, I like all of that. I love taking things apart. I've like redone the chips in my oven and dryer and things like, I just like taking things apart and putting them back together and fixing them. What I also related to her was how she feels, like how she feels when she interacts with people. She was discussing her lack of understanding people with her aunt, and she's asked by people, I guess, multiple times, why are you so grumpy when I'm happy? She doesn't understand. Why do people ask her, why are you grumpy when she feels happy? And then her aunt says, well, you don't look happy. What do you look like when you're happy? And she's like this. And it's just her regular face. And like, I feel like I get that a lot. People are like, oh, what's wrong? Or, this is my like resting judgmental face. And so, yeah, I felt that a lot. And then her mother, when she was having a conversation with her mom tells her, I don't want you to avoid people. And Temple says, they make me feel bad. And like, yeah, I mean, I relate to that too. So, hey, Temple, I'd be friends with you. I love what you're doing. And the theme in the movie overall was about doors. So there was a door, it opens, and I went through it. So that's how I'm trying to like think of things like, doors, opportunities are opening, and we go through them. The movie for my next weakness is this Notorious Squid and the Whale. So I'm with everybody else. I really disliked this film. You already kind of know the basic setting of it, but I actually had it on my Netflix queue because it's like, hey, look, Jeff Daniels, Laura Linney, like, hey, it's gonna be good. So I've had it there for probably at least a couple years. So I was like, oh, this is time to watch it. I'm gonna watch it. So yes, these are an arrogant husband. He doesn't take responsibility for his behavior, for his actions. He's got an older son that idolizes him. We've got a mom who has engaged in infidelity, and the younger son who is more on her side and he actively doesn't want to be like his dad. I mean, I wrote down like one quote that the dad said, this is at the end, since the other physician or student physician did not complete the movie. He said, I did try everything. It's like, no, you didn't. You're like completely unlikable, horrible person. And then as this film went on, this is when I realized that the older son, Frank, what is it? I want to say the Mark Zuckerberg character. Anyway, he is the protagonist, and he was scared of this squid and whale display at the Natural History Museum. And when he was a little kid, he would be terrified. He would look at it through closed fingers, and he'd go home and his mom would tell him about it, and he would be terrified even just thinking about it. Well, at the end, he goes to the museum. His dad is ill and he leaves him, and he goes to the museum and he looks at this display of the squid and the whale that like terrified him his whole life. And he realizes that it's not real and it's not scary. So I feel like he came to this realization that, and sees that his parents are real flawed humans, and he stops idolizing his father and forgives his mother. And so, yeah, it was kind of a hard movie to get through just because of how awful the people all are, but that was their redemption arc. And for what that's worth, anyhow, I know it's hard for me, and I guess I just didn't really like them because they're dishonest, they're not straightforward, they're arrogant. I mean, you can love learning things, but don't be a jerk about it. I don't know. Anyway, so it's just not my vibe. So then how did I use all of this? Well, what I ended up doing was shifting, not so much from like the speaking, because again, this is like a long process. I'm not going to get like instant results, like can get my staff at Office B like talking to me and chit-chatting. That's going to be a while and have to work on that. But I decided to concentrate on how I deal with meetings and speaking at meetings. And then the rest of it I'm kind of still working on. So for speaking, this is like how I felt, where this man's like, I doctor, and I say, I doctor too, because sometimes it's hard for me to form a coherent sentence. I write better than I speak. And then like, oh my gosh, is this like how I talk to patients? They're like, oh, what is this woman saying? My love of learning, it has, it led me to this book, which I am reading, and it helped me to understand the difference between a fight and an argument. In a fight, each disputant fights to win, tries to win, and in an argument, they try to win over the audience. So this is giving me some good material so that I can dive a little bit more in depth on like how I can talk to people, because I'm a troubled case and I need like I need like the ICU. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that. Let's go back. So it's my old PowerPoint and my new PowerPoint. So this was like in March of 2023. I took out some of the extra wordiness, but here's like these slides that were given to me, white background. I just basically read off what was there in my notes. Here's another actual slide. So same kind of thing. It's like, oh, terrible. And I just like read this to the optometrist, like, here's how you co-manage. Then I made one in like September of 2023. So I independently decided, hey, darker background's better. And then I instinctually used 6 items and I used signaling colors. So look how awesome it was. But actually, no, I still did murder by PowerPoint. So here's like sentences, and I read the sentences. And so anyway, yes, it's a travesty. Going on to meetings. So I like this. Usually you see like this meeting could have been an email. So I like this because that's like when I started this whole process, that's how I felt about meetings, that like, hey, we're here to fight. We're not on the same side, but now I know the difference, fight versus argument. Here's an actual exchange of a meeting. This is that I worked on. So I actually literally asked if a call could be an email. This is me in the green. Is there a reason it has to be a call? Wouldn't a few sentences suffice? And then I provide a sentence that I think would be great. Like, hey, can we just do that? And then we just give our input and the whole thing is taken care of in 5 minutes. And I felt like that because I know that the end result is that we're going to increase our pricing for the premium lens. So why are you asking us or pretending to want our input? So anyway, that's me literally telling them like, hey, let's make an email instead of a meeting. So no, we can't do that. So this was in June of this year. So then we were scheduled to have a meeting about IOL upgrades. So that's what I was this like my main thing that I was working on. So we ended up having our meeting. It was in September, September 16th. So I was using all the tools that I could to sort of prepare for that, and mentally prepare for that. And by the way, I felt very vindicated because one of the very end slides was that the conclusion was that we should have different pricing for the two offices, and especially the office that has lower socioeconomic status patients. So it's like, well, I kind of remember telling you guys that at the beginning, but anyway. So this was how I prepared for that meeting. It was a dinner meeting. So I decided that I would use some of the luxuriating meditation, which I'll get to in a little bit, to sort of prepare for the meeting. I was trying to be in the best mindset that I could for the meeting. So I was in my South County office. I had to get all the way up to North County. And so instead of taking the freeway and being bitter when I got there, I took the toll road so that I had like no traffic. I even had time to stop at Petco and buy some aquarium stuff. And then I went to the office, I had the food, and I savored the food. They had salad that had blue cheese in it, which everyone in my house hates blue cheese. So it was the only chance I had to eat blue cheese. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to eat this blue cheese. This is like so delicious. I just like had so much blue cheese. And so it like affected my mood. So I was like in a good mood. I didn't have traffic. I went to the pet store. I ate blue cheese. So I was like ready to deal with these people sort of like in a more open mind. And I feel, so we had our office manager, the other two doctors, myself, a data analyst, I'll just call her the lens lady, and then the finance bro. These are the people that were there. And so I feel like the VP for once, like actually listened to me. The lens lady kept giving the same proposal over and over again 3 times. These are my notes. 3 times, and I had to reiterate 3 times why her proposal wouldn't work unless we fixed a problem that was not allowing us to approach that. And I think she finally got it after the 3rd time. The finance bro was always making little jokes. I felt like he was being very unserious. And so for that, I was trying to be a sneaky facilitator for the part where our senior doctor, who always goes off on tangents and wants to talk about EBITDA and the rest of the finances, I gently suggested that that could be put aside so that we could finish this meeting and then have a different meeting. And so to go over our Q2 review. And so my reward was that, yes, the meeting went well, but now I have a meeting next week because now I have this meeting to do the Q2. So being like the sneaky facilitator worked, but now I just got more meetings, but I feel like better about the meeting. Okay, emails. Again, I'm not too bothered by them. I purge them like every couple of weeks. I check them late at night. And then I scroll through titles and I set reminders for things that seem important. And I actually kind of feel like these short, curt emails are consistent with like how I'm perceived. So it didn't really seem like a bad thing to change from the flowery, like, hi, I hope this email finds you well and that you and your loved ones are, enjoying a beautiful fall day. And so like cutting all that out and just going like, here's what I want, here's what I need. So I used this in practice. And I also use this to like try to get some delegation going. I sent an email for an EMR issue. We needed an update for our tech's iPads. So I emailed the IT department and I CC'd the 2 managers and the doctors again, because sort of like as to guilt them into doing something and to prove that they knew about it. So anyway, I sent this email. It's really small. You're not going to be able to read it. But anyway, it's just the main thing is that I sent this email. It wasn't ignored. It was at 9:50 in the morning and the whole issue was updated and resolved by 10:37. And the manager stepped in to finish the rest of the the things that the IT department needed to get it done. So I felt like, oh my gosh, not only did I write a short specific email about like what I needed done immediately, it got done, and then like it sort of delegated too. So I was like, yay. And then because like for delegation, like I just have a problem with that. I've always felt like if you want something done, you should do it yourself if you want it done right. And so yeah, it's definitely something I am going to work with, and using the little square to decide who I trust to delegate to versus who I need to try to just excite or, dictate what needs to be done. But again, I'm a work in progress. And then my struggles, the main thing that I'm thinking, like, what am I going to struggle with is like, how do I maintain like authenticity of who I am while still trying to be more Pollyanna-ish? Like, do I walk into the office with like little bluebirds on my shoulders, like Snow White, and, like, hi, hello, have a charming morning. Like, that's just not me. So just trying to work on staying authentic, but I don't know, more socially intelligent, more socially acceptable. And then the thing is that I don't necessarily know if I want to try to change our office culture. Like, I almost don't feel as invested since I'm an employee owner, but it's not the same entity that it was when it was just the boomer, the Gen X, and the millennial working together in private practice. So I don't know, do I need to step in and fix this, or should I try to use my skills elsewhere? Anyhow, I'm still thinking and contemplating that. And the meditations, again, I touched on how I used the savoring meditation to sort of try to get into a good mindset for meetings. I'm going to use that again because we're eating up the water grill. It's a good restaurant anyway. So we're doing that for next week, and I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to try to shift my perspective of the meeting being an opportunity to spend time with the other doctors versus we're wasting 3 doctor hours by being at this meeting. I used a compassion meditation to have more compassion for my office manager of Office B. And it worked. So it affects how I see her and how I talk to her and interact with her. And yeah, I mean, I just have learned that change is a process. Persuasion's hard. I can deal with all of this. It's like me. I'm the one that has to react and choose how I feel. I learned that PowerPoint's a tool. And finally, to end on a lighter note, Botox. I got Botox on my depressor anguli oris, so it took away, and also the glabellar folds, takes away that resting judgmental face. I just did this like week and a half ago. And I don't know, I mean, maybe it's a placebo effect, but I feel like I look more pleasant, feel like people perceive me as more pleasant instead of like, oh, what's her problem? What's she judging? So I'll let you know after a few more weeks or months of this. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing now.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was like so long. It just went. Yeah, it's like if you've watched The Lord of the Rings, that's how long it is. That's like my presentation is like all 3 episodes of Lord of the Rings. And you're just like, oh my God, all she's doing is walking and walking and walking.
Your love of learning clearly comes through, and how detail oriented are you? And actually, I'm the sociopath who's making people watch that movie, the awful movie, the Squid. In fact, others can relate to you. 2 senior people, Dr. Multack and Dr. Castillo, said yes. So Dr. Multack says, I've been a CMO for a large system for 14 years. Perception is reality, and 25% of complaints would be like what you said. I coach doctors who get blamed for disruptive behavior. And then it's actually very satisfying because it's so easy. However, I can see that one thing and again, when you're talking journey, when you're talking quest, in the quest, there is a threshold. And at the threshold, you're going to feel the most awkward. So when you said, I am like, am I going to be authentic or not? Is this going to be me? Am I going to combine this with something? That's what he says. You can combine them and then they work much better versus one. So I would say enjoy being on the threshold. That threshold is not a non-space. That threshold is a place. And just like a threshold comes with some disenchantment, the enchantment breaks the old one. The new world shows up like Neo shows, oh my God, what am I getting into? Is this the real world? And then, but am I still real or not? And there is disorientation at that time. There's even some sort of what we will say disengagement. Is this being a doctor means? Am I losing meaning in medicine? So being on that threshold, if you take a little breath and say, this is actually not, oh, just, we're just going to get there. No, no, no. This is actually a whole thing. You heard Tim Winter say forest dwelling, that forest dwelling, where you stay and say, okay, I'm on the threshold. I'm going to find something. I may just make a little sortie and come back, take a little quest, come back. And then there is new you that comes out. That's the Pro 2.0. This is such a wonderful journey you told us. This is, and you said that you're taking quests now, and then you still come back, and at the threshold, you're feeling, is this still me? So this is such a fantastic. Anybody else? Do you have any other questions before we wrap up? It'll just give me a couple of minutes so I can tell you what the post CME is. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes, examples and stories. So Rose, your journey, the story, kept the whole thing threaded through. That's the context, and then everyone can relate to that. So fantastic. So like where we started is, let's end there, which is the context. When you want to move from one top to the next, Pro 1.0 to 2.0, you're gonna be called upon to do the leadership-like things. It's a given. You get 1,000 calls a day to do a quest. Either you're gonna refuse and continue feeling the pain, or you're gonna do what our brave explorers did. You heard their stories. They are on a quest. They really trusted you so they could share these with you. And that's where, yes, some things need fixing, but sometimes some prevention works before fixing is needed. Sometimes you really have to go boldly where you have not gone before. So that's where moving to that level means you have to ritualize being impactful with others. And this is the only way I know, where a quest feels a little bit short term or on an expedition going with others, as opposed to saying, oh, I have to do it all by myself, or somebody else is going to come and solve my problems. So that's where, in the end, if you see that this is where you are, and so let's say if this is where you are now, and in 12 months, which is in the future, time travel, you want to be a leader, you want to be seen as a leader. But right now, you feel most of the times others see me as a technical expert. Time is very cruel and brutal. It has a drift that has this tendency to take you down. So whether with private equity or your team members or being in that corporate, cog in a wheel, it's going to make you feel like that. And that's where you're going to have to make the decision to act. And the timeline is different. The mindset is different. That samatha meditation tells us the kind of things we have to do versus just tell me, how to get to Albany type of situation. So that's where, but this is also a reality that as time goes by, the difference between the red and dark green only gets farther and farther. And then to bring it closer and to climb it up, to get to that mountain, it gets riskier because then you're not sure. It gets harder. It also gets costlier, costs more money, because sometimes you may even leave money on the table because you left the profession being disenchanted. So if you want to jump lines, And if you want to ride this curve up there and stay there and accelerate, you have to take a quest or an expedition. That's the only way I know how to do this. And that's what you heard these 2 days, these brave explorers do. I'm so thankful that they did this and gave me the opportunity to do this. I'm also thankful to the colleges for letting me do this. So how long are you prepared to wait? And on that message, let's say goodbyes. You're free to go.